Okay, so, well, welcome everyone. There's a lot to cover in our NSC intern orientation, and I'll just emphasize that this is the general intern orientation. You will most likely also work with your supervisor on things that are very specific to your program. This document that I'm working from, I'm going to be sending it out to you as well. So you'll have this for yourself that you can print out or you can just use to refer back to. So these are basically a few things that we're going to cover today. I'm going to talk a little bit about NSC in general, a little overview, some internship information that you need to know, code of conduct, an overview of our programs, and a few other things that are very specific to the work you'll be doing, using language line, immigration terms that you might not be familiar with. But I'm also going to talk about self-care opportunities and also our professional development opportunities. So this guide, which I'll be sending out to each of you, has a lot of the information in it that you'll need, but not everything. So if there's anything missing, you feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you my email, but also your supervisor will be able to fill you in. Within this document, there's a lot of training videos. Some of them are just a few minutes long, so don't worry when you see how many of them there are, and others are a little bit longer. So you can go through, and I tried to organize them in a way that made sense as we go through this. Your supervisor might have a training form for you to fill out that asks some questions. Of course, this is nothing graded or anything like that, but we just want to make sure that you're picking up on some of the important information that we cover during orientation, because you'll need it in the work you'll be doing. Make sure that you get your two things from here that you'll need to know. One is to get your email, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that if you haven't gotten it yet, but that's something that your supervisor will help you work through, getting your NSC email. And also, you won't need the door code. That's usually when we're on site, so we won't worry about that. But also what your program cost code is. This is a number that's specifically correlated to your program. And whenever you use language line or certain other things that you have to apply to a certain program, you will need to know what this cost center code is. So make sure that you ask your supervisor that. Okay. Any questions before we move forward? And you can just, I'm not going to pull up the list of faces, so you can just ask your question.
I actually wanted to apologize. I did not know exactly what you were referring to in the beginning of this. I live in the countryside, so I haven't exactly been exposed to this, but I've just been so used to trying to obtain a sense of normalcy, especially during quarantine. So I haven't really been on social media, and I just wanted to apologize. And I understand how tragic this situation is, and my heart goes out to you all who have been more affected, and also the protesters who simply just want equality.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So NSC, I'll give you a bit of an overview. We just recently changed our mission statement for a couple of reasons. One, mission statements kind of get outdated over time and you have to change things. But we really have started to serve a much broader community. We were very focused on refugee resettlement, but with the current administration and cuts in refugee resettlement, that we have started to serve a much broader range of clients. So we broadened our mission statement so that we can include that. Recently, we did a workshop on an NSC elevator pitch, because what you're going to find out quickly is people are going to ask you, so what does NSC do? And it's really hard to explain because we do so much. And you all will get familiar with your program, and maybe in this short period of time, you won't have a chance to get familiar with all the programs. But this will give you a way to talk about NSC when people ask you. And as well established as NSC is, we're almost 100 years old. We turn 100 next year. A lot of people in Philadelphia don't know we are there, and we're right in the center of Philadelphia. And I meet people all the time that say, oh, I work 2 blocks from there. I didn't know you guys were there. So in a way, we're a bit understated, and it's always good for us as representatives to let people know that NSC exists, that we're always looking for support. And of course, if people know individuals or families that might benefit from our services, that they can refer to us. So is there anyone that just wants to read this short bit, this NSC elevator pitch, just this little paragraph at the top here?
I guess speak authentically, start from your own zone of influence, and bring the person in more. So for almost 100 years, NSC has empowered immigrants to thrive in our communities and pursue a just future. Each year, we serve over 5,000 immigrants, including refugees, asylum seekers, and survivors of crime in the greater Philadelphia region and beyond. We provide comprehensive services and supports, including legal protections and remedies, health and wellness, education and employment services, and language access. And then we finish with a personal response, as if, like, I am particularly proud of NSC's services and efforts, and
Exactly. Great. Thank you. Yeah. So this is just give you a little blurb that you can say to people when they ask you what NSC is all about. And because I know just from personal experience, sometimes if you try to cover it all, you sound like you're kind of just rambling on. But the truth of the matter is we really do a lot of things. So it's hard to sum it up. So NSC was founded in 1921. Originally, it was part of the YWCA, and it was a place to teach ESL English to women who were immigrants. And that's what the original NSC was. It was called something else. It was, in the early years, was called the International Institute of Philadelphia. And so if you look back and you Google back, you probably won't see NSC mentioned in the earlier days in any sort of history, because it wasn't called NSC. In the 1960s, we became the National Service Center, Nationality Service Center. And this was an expansion for NSC because the needs for immigrants were clearly more than just learning English. There were so many things that needed to happen for people where people needed assistance. So Nationality Service Center was founded. In 1980, the Refugee Resettlement Act, that's the year of the Refugee Resettlement Act, and that is a policy where there's a very defined refugee resettlement policy and procedure. And particularly at that point, there was a need for service agencies that provided English, law, legal, health access, employment, all of those things that someone would need if they were coming to the country new. This will give you an idea of where this 5,000 people each year come from. You can see we have a huge legal department, and we serve many people in our English classes, and we are currently running them through Zoom, and hopefully we'll be back on site in the fall. Through our health and wellness and survivor services, which are basically our case management programs. We serve approximately 1,200 people each year. And then we have an interpretation and translation department which is one of our fee-for-service programs where outside groups will send documents to have translated, or they need interpreters. We also use them internally as well. So just to give you a sense of where we are in history, in September 2016, we had approximately 96 refugee arrivals per month, compared to May 2019, where we only had 11 refugee arrivals. This is because the president, whoever the president is at the time, sets a cap on the number of refugees that can enter the country that year. So in the last year of Obama's presidency, he set it at 110,000. And this year, Trump has set it at 18,000. So you can see there's a dramatic drop in the number of refugees that are actually allowed to enter into the country. These are caps. So even this 18,000 doesn't mean that 18,000 will enter. It means that that's the maximum number. So this is really significant for us at NSC. It's significant for our clients and their families. And it's very significant for the US, as we used to stand for welcoming refugees, and we're clearly in a place right now where that has drastically changed. We have approximately 59, just around 60 staff, and many, many interns and volunteers as well. Just to give you a sense of our budget, I'm not going to go through this, but just wanted to give you a sense of where NSC, a budget can give you a lot of information about an agency. So in this time, in the first year of the current administration, we lost $1 million in funding. And that was very much connected to that refugee resettlement programming. So we knew we had to start finding funding in other places where people really supported our mission and supported the clients that we serve. And so we've done a lot of outreach to foundations and to private donors, and have gotten incredible response. Sometimes you just have to ask, and people that care will step forward. A quick note before we move forward. During coronavirus, and I know this is a really odd time to be an intern because you're not on site and so much is done remotely, that's we just have to acknowledge that just is a strange place to be. But to give you an idea of what our clients are dealing with, that most of our clients earn low or are in low paying jobs. Many work in retail and food packing or food services, which obviously there's a danger in being in those jobs if you still have it. And many of our clients do not receive benefits. So any of the unemployment benefits and things like that are happening, many of our clients would not be eligible for that. So if we have clients that have lost their job, are not eligible for benefits, and are needing to pay their rent, obviously there's a huge amount of stress and concern with clients. NSC is doing massive fundraising to help clients get through this really difficult time, at least with rent. We do food deliveries, and we are fully functioning, operating, even though it is off-site. So I just want to pause there. I know that's a lot of information, but are there any questions about this just general overview?
Oh, actually, I do have one quick question.
Sure.
I was going to ask earlier, but I wanted you to finish that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
For elevator speech, like, what did you mean by Yeah, what did you mean by start from your own zone of influence?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So um, we have found that if you try to talk about everything at NSC, it sort of sounds like you're all over the place, because there's so many things. So the best place, if you only have a few minutes, and if you're not familiar with the term elevator speech, it means if you got in an elevator and someone asked you, what is NSC, that you'd be able to explain it by the time you got off at your floor. So starting by talking about what you're doing at NSC, the team you're working for, and the services that your team offers is always a good place to start, because you'll know more about that. So that's a great place to start. And then just knowing a little bit of the general, it's 100 years old. We serve immigrants and refugees. We serve about 5,000 people a year. We have legal department, health and wellness, education. If you can pick up some of those points, then it'll just make it sound like a more solid elevator speech. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so some of this I'm not going to go through because are we set to go to 2:00?
I think it was 2:30.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. I was getting a little worried because I was looking at the time. Okay, perfect. 2:30, great. Some of this is, you can peruse through on your own. This is our organizational chart. It'll give you a sense of who works in NSC and what our structure is. But one thing you will want to know is that our executive director is Margaret O'Sullivan. So if you hear her name, if you're ever in a meeting where she's on, you'll know that that's our executive director. I'm just going to enlarge this a little bit. So here are the countries that clients are from. These countries, the clients that we serve are from these countries. So you can see already we serve a lot of people. Most of these countries speak a different language. And so we are truly have a multicultural client base. And a lot of who we serve will be dictated about what's going on in the world currently. If you ever do get to visit NSC, which I hope you do, this is a mural that's in our lobby, and it was a mural that was created by our clients, our staff, our interns and volunteers, as well as mural arts and Penn students. So this is a huge mural that's at NSC, and it represents all the different countries that we serve. And the symbols are all different, which images of taking a journey, since everyone who we work with has taken a journey to Philadelphia. So when I send this out, you're going to want to go through and click on these links that will take you to our YouTube channel to watch all of these videos. Again, I'll mention some of them are very short, so don't get overwhelmed when you see them. Okay, we are going to be having a boundary setting workshop that's coming up. Your supervisor will let you know when that's happening. I think I actually have it at the end of this document as well. So we're not going to get into this too much because it's really a big topic, working with clients. So I hope that you all can make it to that workshop, which I will be recording as well. So if for some reason you can't make it, it'll be available to you. But I'll give you an idea of what we will be covering. So a lot of times we find ourselves in situations where there might be some boundary crossing happening. I don't like to say there's any specific rule about what you do, because I do think it's very situational. For example, I'm just looking at this first one. You have a client who hugs you every time they see you. How would you handle this situation? So before we even talk about what it looks like at NSC, what's your gut feeling about the response to that question?
I guess when, for instance, like when the client does come in for a hug, you like figure out another way to kind of interact with them and say like, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" Like, don't it kind of engage in that hug, and they'll kind of get the message that like you're trying to, maintain because we're in like a professional place, so we're trying to maintain professionalism, and so I think that's what I did. I did that one time, not at NSC, but somewhere else, and it seemed to work. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. So what I'll say, because I look at this question and I get a little confused about it myself, because I can think of so many scenarios where it might go one way or the other. So I would say if it's someone that you don't know very well, I think what you just mentioned as a solution is a really great way. I will say, like, I've worked at NSC for a really long time, and I work in a little bit different role than certain other staff. So I have, a group that I work with weekly. They're all women, and they very much come in for a hug often. So in that scenario, I would feel uncomfortable not having the hug in a way. It would seem very strange because we're close as a group. But if I were an intern meeting a client for a first time, or if I felt uncomfortable about it myself, I think definitely coming up with this alternate friendly solution is a good idea. So the bottom line is, I think it depends what the scenario is, it depends who the client is, and it depends who you are. And I think that's true with a lot of these questions, but some of them are very straightforward. So I will come to one which I know has come up, which is this one right here. So just take a moment. I'll read it out loud. An intern is escorting a client to a medical evaluation. On the walk over, he is pleasant, but mentions several times how beautiful he finds the woman. After the appointment, he asks the intern if she'd like to go for coffee. What do you say?
uh, I had actually this happened not like so I was escorting a client one time, and the client, it was a similar situation where the client said like, "Oh, by the way, I have like a family friend from my country, and he's looking for someone to be with or something." And so I just kindly said, "Oh, really? That's so nice." And I kind of just changed the subject. Or in this situation, I just said, "Oh, I can't. I'm so sorry." I also said like I have I have my school. I have to go back to. I have to my studies, and so I only work a certain time period, and I have to go and study because I have homework, tests. Then also I have to do stuff with family. So I just come up with different like excuses that are very valid because that is primarily what happens during a semester. You have like college stuff and whatever, and so then they understand. They're like, "Okay, yeah, that's totally okay," and that's usually how it ends, and you continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, I just have to acknowledge it's an uncomfortable scenario, right? Like, that's an uncomfortable scenario. You don't want to hurt someone's feelings. You don't want to, culturally, there might be something happening that you're not totally aware of. Maybe this is not inappropriate, where this person is coming from. Maybe they don't understand what your role is. Maybe they're lonely. Like, there's so many things to think about there. But I would say, I would recommend being really direct with clients, and especially with something like this where potentially an excuse might not like maybe the next time you see the person that they say it again. And part of what we do is not just create professionalism, but we also are teaching our clients what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in the US. So you can kind of think of it as a teaching opportunity a bit, but I would recommend that you be direct and say, even if it's something very simple, like, "Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. But, I work at NSC, and we are not we aren't able to meet with our clients outside of NSC, just to let people know that you're, that's a rule. That's a rule where we are. And if you get stuck and you're super uncomfortable and you mean to say that, but it doesn't come out, make sure you mention it to your supervisor, because we have had situations where it's gotten a little, blown up. So you always want to, when there's something a little off like this, if you weren't able to, didn't come up with the right words on the spot because you were uncomfortable and caught off guard, just make sure you say something to your supervisor so that she can help navigate that with you. So we'll go over more of these in the training, but this will give you an idea of, the types of things these are real scenarios. So, you can just think about like, how would I handle that? And we'll go over this more during the training. So confidentiality is incredibly important for a lot of reasons. One, obviously we owe it to our clients. We agree to confidentiality, not sharing their information, outside of working with each other at NSC. But our clients in particular, also because some people may be, have tentative immigration status. Some people might be in a domestic violence situation. Some people may have left home because of their role as an advocate or something like that, where exposing their personal information would actually be dangerous for them. So besides the consideration of just keeping privacy, there's also a safety concern. So you guys are not working on site, but in case for somehow we end up there, or you end up working in a similar agency, it also means not leaving documents lying around that have people's names on it, or if you go to make a photocopy, that you don't leave a copy of someone's social security number accidentally in the trash, not shredded. So it's really being careful about that. It can also be about the way that you write emails. So, it's generally speaking at NSC, we'll use someone's first name, but we don't include the entire name. And if there's anything too private in the email, it's better done by phone call. So if you're talking to your supervisor and there's something very detailed and sensitive, you should call your supervisor to talk to them about that instead of writing it all into an email. Okay. Any questions about that confidentiality piece? Okay, great. So I'll just pick a few of these to go through, and you can let me know what you think. So true or false, when speaking with other service providers within NSC, use clients' names or other identifying information in public areas, such as hallways, lobbies, elevators, sidewalks. It's okay to talk about clients in these areas. True or false?
I'd say false.
Yes, it's a false. So again, you guys are at NSC, so I feel like we're speaking a little bit abstractly, but NSC is a very busy place, and it's not uncommon to be stopped in the hallway by a client or another case manager, and and sometimes you can forget where you are and start to have conversations. But there's so many people around that in itself is a violation of someone's privacy. So you want to be aware of those types of conversations. Okay, this one you should know. When sending an email to outside agencies, it's okay to use full names.
False.
False, right. So this says outside agencies. So there will be times where maybe you have to do a referral for someone and it will ask for someone's full name. But if you're reaching out to an outside agency, let's say to see if they have services that we don't provide that you're looking for our client, you don't even need to mention the person's name in the email. You could just say, I have a client, this is their needs, is there, does your agency offer services that could help them? And then hopefully if the answer is yes, we do, that would lead to a phone call conversation with that agency. Of course, if you're filling out an application or a referral form, you would have to use their full name. But in general inquiry kind of emails, you do not want to do that. So there are some times that we do break confidentiality. Has anyone on the call had mandated reporting child abuse training?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So if you're not familiar with that, every state has child abuse reporting laws, and Pennsylvania's are pretty strict. So you can take a free child abuse training from University of Pittsburgh. They have an online one, it's free, where you can learn like what is the law, what is my responsibility. But a mandated reporter is basically anybody that works in a place where children are regularly part of the programming, which NSC would count as. So we are all mandated reporters because of that. And it basically means that we're mandated to report any sort of abuse, severe abuse, or severe neglect. So we're not going to get into this. Obviously, it's a whole long training, but just so that you know, those are times where we break confidentiality, where it doesn't, where we don't follow that. Or if someone's going to harm somebody else is the other scenario. So if you're ever faced with a client situation where you're feeling something's happening, you're going to want to consult with your supervisor immediately about that to get her insight on how to proceed. Some of this I'm not going to get into because it's a lot of on-site stuff, but one thing I will say is if you have any assignments that you have due, I know you guys are summer interns, so you might not have that, but if you do, you want to make sure that you give your supervisor at least a week notice to prepare that if she has to give you any input. Slow times at NSC, there's always things to do at NSC. It's a little tougher now that, we're not in the office. There's lots of things around the office that we do all the time. But if you're having, if you find that you don't have enough assignments, reach out to your supervisor and let her know there's always additional things to do. And, we all appreciate having as much help as possible. So each of our programs at NSC, and when you receive this in your email later, you'll be able to click on and hear a short video about each program. But basically, NSC offers multiple no-cost programs for our clients, including resettlement and placement. We do everything from picking up newly arrived refugees at the airport, setting up their homes, getting their kids enrolled in school, helping them navigate the medical system, getting furniture, food, all of those things. So NSC participates in that. We also help clients as they're adjusting their status. If they have one immigration status and then they need to, they're eligible to adjust their status to something that is more in their favor. We have multiple employment programs. So we have clients that, enroll in different things. We have Job Club and different trainings, but we also assist clients in finding their first job in the US. We have a full health team where we, help clients enroll in insurance, help clients navigate the medical system and learn how to make appointments, and which paperwork they need to bring with them, if they need to see a specialist, anything like that. The wellness program is what I coordinate. We offer on-site therapy for clients that are enrolled in our programs. We have an on-site psychologist, art therapist, music therapist, and movement therapist, as well as master's level students. We have that service for clients that are enrolled in our programs. We also offer holistic programming, including acupuncture, yoga, and massage, and reflexology. For you all, we also offer for staff. So I run a yoga class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Teams, and also a meditation session on Tuesday and Thursday. So we'll talk more about that, but if you all are interested in participating in that, you are welcome to. Our Inspire program is our program that works with clients with high medical needs, including developmental disabilities. And we also have occupational therapists that work with clients in that program. Philadelphia Partnership for Resilience, which we call PPR, is our survivor of torture program. Bridge to Wellness, which we call BTW, is our survivor of crime and domestic violence program. We have an anti-human trafficking program, which we call AHT. We have a program called Family Strengthening Program, which is a series of workshops that focus on communication within families and financial literacy. We have a full legal team that works with immigration cases. Some of those clients are also enrolled in our social service programs, and others are from outside of NSC. We do have walk-in hours. This might not be accurate during the shutdown, but if you meet anyone that's ever interested in seeing if they are eligible for our services, they can call our main number and they'll be able to find out what the next walk-in hours is. Right now they're being done by phone. We have a full education department with ESL classes for our clients, but also for outside groups and people that want to come in to learn English. And as I mentioned, we have an interpretation and translation department as well. So ESL, legal, and interpretation and translation are our only fee-for-service programs, although we do have some people involved in legal and education who are part of our program so that they get pro bono services there. There are lots of videos here for you to watch to get a sense of the immigration process. And I've included here a lot of definitions, brief definitions of immigration terms, which you're going to hear a lot of, and it takes a while to understand them. But I'm just going to look at two today with you. One is refugee, and the other is asylum seeker. Does anyone by chance know the difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So a refugee is someone who has claimed asylum and has received asylum, while an asylum seeker is someone who does not yet have that refugee status or those protections.
Great, great. So the only thing I'd add to that, and that was well worded, is that when someone seeks asylum or refugee status outside of the country, and they come to and they're accepted into the U.S. refugee resettlement program, that's a refugee. An asylum seeker is always someone who's in the U.S. already, who asks for asylum. So does that make sense that the refugee process happens outside of the country and the asylum process happens while someone's is already in the country? So that's just an important distinction. So when someone is a refugee, first of all, refugee is an immigration status term. So if someone, seeks to become a get refugee status, they receive it, they will be assigned to a country. So a lot of people think that people have a choice of where they go, but they actually don't. The only time that might be different is if they already have family resettled in a certain country. There is an effort to keep families together. So, but otherwise, you might end up in the US, you might end up in Canada, you might end up in Philadelphia, you might end up in Minnesota. There's a lot of things that can happen there. But when refugees come to the US, they already have certain access to certain services. They have work authorization, they receive health insurance, they receive some financial insurance. So they get financial assistance. Once a refugee is here in the US, there are some services that are already set up for them for a certain period of time. So one thing that I always like to throw out here, because I don't think many people know this, is once a refugee is in the United States, they actually pay back their plane fare for getting here. And it's done over a period of time. So if you're working in our refugee resettlement department, you might hear someone reference that. And I think most people don't know that, and just a little tidbit of information. So this will give you an idea of where our refugees are coming from right now. Obviously, this changes over time. I actually started at NSC as an intern when I was getting my MSW. I was an intern for 2 years in our Survivor of Torture program. And when I came, many Syrians were coming into the country. That was the primary group of people. But since different limitations have happened in our border openings and our refugee program, other groups, we see an uptick in certain other groups, and then a lot of other groups are not coming in as much. So later, when you get this, you can look a little bit to see what that refugee process looks like. It's very complicated. It can take a couple of years for it to happen. There's many hoops to jump through before actually getting here. So I wanted to point this out. Does anyone remember what happened in 1980? Does anyone remember that date? We mentioned it earlier in our elevator pitch.
The
Yeah,
Refugee Resettlement Act?
Yes, great. So that's significant because if you look at this chart, you can see in the US history of the Refugee Resettlement Act, that's the year that the most number of refugees were admitted to the country, which sort of makes sense. It was a new program. And over the years, it's gone up and down, but for the most part, it's kind of stayed at least at this 50,000 level. But you can see where we are now. And one special note is, if you look at what happens right here, why is that date significant there?
It's after the terrorist attacks in 2001.
Exactly. So you can understand that maybe in the country there was a little drop off here, but even in that time period we still were receiving more refugees than the current time period. So that's pretty drastic. What's happening now is really so drastically different than what's happened in the past. So asylum seeker, just like Olivia mentioned, is someone who's seeking asylum And as I clarified, once they're in the United States. So an asylum seeker might be here on a travel visa or a student visa, or maybe someone comes to the border and requests asylum. So we already know what's happening at our southern border in regards to that. This is not totally up to date. It's a little bit old, but you can get a sense of who is, who's coming to the US requesting asylum. And take a bit when you receive this to read through these just to get familiar. And then there's a few training videos for you to watch. So just one other thing that I'll mention in here. Oh, okay. So you've probably heard this term green card before. You hear in movies all the time, someone will mention it. A green card is an authorization to work. So for our clients, receiving their green card is a very big deal. That's a big moment because it means they received work authorization. When refugees arrive into the country, they do have work authorization, but it's temporary. And then after 1 year, they can apply for a green card. And after 5 years, they can apply for citizenship. So those are kind of like the markers. For an asylum seeker, once they receive asylum, they virtually follow the same process as refugees. But that beginning to end, asking for asylum to receiving asylum is a very long, drawn out process. It's a legal proceeding. And some people do not receive asylum, in which case they would be put in the position where they would have to potentially leave the country. Okay, so lots for you to look at here. Has anyone ever used phone interpretation before?
I have once.
And how was it?
It was actually really it was really organized because all you had to do was for language line, for instance, we had to put in the cost center code and then ask for a certain language. Like, for instance, if we need Spanish, we'll say like, oh, I need an interpreter for Spanish. And then the interpreter comes on, and then you call your client, and you just let the interpreter know beforehand, like a summary of what you're going to be discussing, and then you just have to pause in between everything you say in order for the interpreter to interpret. And yeah, it works very smoothly. At the end of the call, you thank the interpreter, and the interpreter talks to the client, and then they call me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what happens. So I'll have to say, when you first do this, it's a very awkward interaction, but we do it so often at NSC that we don't even think about it. Like, we just do it so often. But essentially, that summary gives you an idea of what happens. For our language line, this is the call-in number. They'll ask for our client ID, which is NSC's client ID. It'll talk you through this. They talk you through the whole thing, but essentially you press 1 for Spanish and 2 for any other language. Someone gets on the phone, they ask you what language you're trying to get, or you say it into the phone. But some languages, when you say it into the automated system, it just will not recognize what it is, but a person does eventually get on the phone. And then they're gonna ask you for your name and your cost center code. So remember, I suggested to you guys, you talk to your supervisor and ask them, what is your program's cost center code? They're gonna ask you for that. And then when we get our bill, we know where to assign that cost. So if you're working with the health team has its own code, and that's what you would give them there. We also have on-site interpreters, which we're using remotely right now as well. We have a Spanish, French, Arabic, Dari, Pashto, and Swahili interpreter. The on-site interpreters are a lot cheaper than the phone interpretation, so we use the on-site interpreters whenever we can. Sometimes it's not possible, and we have to use language line. So just make sure that you clarify with your supervisor if they ask you to contact a client, which type of interpretation they want you to use. One clarification is interpretation is when you're speaking, and translation is a written document. So if you wanted to get someone to do a phone call for you, that would be interpretation. If you needed to turn a document from English to Spanish and you want someone to write it in Spanish for you, that would be called a translation. So we refer to the people that work for us as interpreters, not translators. So this is if you were working in person. There's a very specific way that you sit so that the three people, the interpreter, the case manager, or intern, and the client are comfortable and the session goes smoothly. And this will give you a little, some of this you won't have to do because you're not in person, but it'll give you an idea of how you use interpretation, how you speak during interpretation. You always speak to your client directly. So I would say, "Hi, Maria, it's really nice to see you today." I wouldn't say, "Tell Maria that I said hello." So you're going to speak to your client directly. You're going to speak in short sentences so that the interpreter has time to interpret. And the interpreter should say exactly what you say. Of course, since they're speaking in another language, we might not know that. But if you get the sense that an interpreter is saying a lot more than what you just said, you can interrupt the interpreter and ask them to tell you what they're saying, just to make sure that they're not going off script. And interpreters are not supposed to add in any of their personal viewpoints or suggestions. Sometimes it happens that people do, not our on-site interpreters, but sometimes with telephone interpretation. So you just want to be aware that you're the one that is hiring the service, so you can stop the interpreter and politely ask them to repeat what they're saying and ask them to only say what you're saying directly. When I send this out to you, I'm also going to send you our critical incident protocols. We have sort of infographics for each one. You want to look at those closely and make sure you understand them. And if you have any questions, reach out to your supervisor and ask them which ones you would be responsible for. And if you are responsible for some of those critical incident responses, make sure that you understand it properly. Okay. You may have to do some case noting. Has anyone done this type of case noting before?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So case noting is basically after every interaction we have with a client, we document it. Your supervisor will talk you through how they like you to do your case notes. But basically it follows this who, what, when, where, what, and follow up kind of, order. And so that if I went in, if one of you wrote a case note and I also work with that client and I want to go in and see if you did this thing that I'm just about to do, I could go in and find out and be like, "Oh, no, I see someone already did that for that client. I don't need to do it now." This is a typical case note kind of model that is used a lot in social work. So you can look through if you're not sure exactly how to write it. There's some examples here, and I'm sure your supervisor will give you input on how they like to have their case notes written. Case notes are not meant to be very long. They're meant to be brief with not a huge amount of detail in them, but really concise so that anyone could go in after you and know what happened during that time. Okay. I included here also a bunch of acronyms that we use a lot. You know, once someone starts using acronyms, they forget that someone hearing it for the first time has no idea what that means. So you can look through here. These are a lot of the acronyms that we use, different programs and you know, applications and things that we use with clients. So you can use this as a reference later on. Okay. So I know that's a lot and it's a very broad span of things, but is there anything that was mentioned that you're not clear of on or you'd like more detail?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about apricot,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, I just don't know about like how to like sign into that or any of that sort of thing.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
great. So first of all, if you're not familiar with what apricot is, and half of us say apricot and half of us say apricot, so there's no right way to say it. We all say it a little differently. So apricot is our client management system. So basically, we keep all of our client information in there, all the case notes, any documents they sign, that type of thing. But I'm also going to show you, I'm just going to pull up a different document real quick. Okay. I'll send this to you as well. This is the way that you're going to sign in as an intern. So I'm going to send you this document. It's pretty straightforward, but you know, just like any system, when you're seeing it for, do you see a new document?
It's like in transition mode.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I see it's making, okay, maybe I just need to,
You might need to adjust which like application you have on the screen share.
okay, let's see here. Oh, okay,
Now we see it.
okay, cool. All right, so I'm gonna send this out to you. Apricot is pretty straightforward, but any system that you're using for the first time, obviously it's gonna not look as clear to you as it does to people that have been using it for a long time. This is the person you wanna talk to. Carolyn is great. She does all the apricot things and she's a really good teacher. So she's very patient and talks people through things. Feel free to reach out to her at any time. If you go to try to do this and it doesn't work for you for some reason, please reach out to her. She's a good contact. So this will come also as a follow-up. It'll talk to you how you create your account, how you log your time, all of those things will be here. Okay, so it's pretty simple, but again, if you try this later and it doesn't work, just email Carolyn and she will help you out quickly. Okay, let me see, link you back. Okay. Are you looking at something that says intern orientation?
Yep.
Okay, great. It's always like when these things are happening. Okay, so we're gonna do a short activity and we call it the suitcase activity. So I'm gonna give you just about 3 minutes. And if you have a pen and paper, you can jot it down. You can just think about it. And then we're going to share our thoughts. So imagine you live in a small village and you're in your home you're cooking dinner and suddenly you hear a commotion outside and you realize that there is something bad happening in your town and you have to leave in just a matter of minutes and you need to pack what you think you'll need and you don't know if you'll be able to return to your home. So take the next 3 minutes and just think about what are the things that you would take with you. Just a few more moments. So come back to the group. So what are the things that you thought of?
So I wrote down water, ID papers, whatever money I had, a jacket and a few changes of clothes, any valuable items that are small like family jewelry, a tool or weapon that I could use for basic utility, and maybe some photos or any sentimental items.
Nice, great. Anyone else want to share?
I said any clothing, travel documents, identification information, water, food, any kind of food that I had around, any hygiene material or medical material that I use, any sum of money I have, and then any communication devices I might have.
Great. Anyone else want to share?
Sure. Yeah, so I said my wallet, my phone, my charger, food, water, clothes, soap, medicine, a lighter, and my passport.
Great. So those are great ideas, and I'm glad to hear that everyone mentioned documents because a lot of people forget that, and I know that we see with our clients, one, maybe those documents just don't exist. So there is no grabbing of documents, but then, if you can imagine if you end up having to leave your country and going to another country and you don't have documentation for certain things, it can be really hard to even prove who you are. So any documentation is really important. And you'll notice that when you start to work with clients, a lot of our clients have the birthday January 1. And the reason that is when someone comes new to the country and they either don't have documentation of their birth date, or maybe they come from a place where there aren't birth certificates, they are assigned January 1 as their birthday. So you'll notice that that's something that comes up a lot. We also have, unfortunately, people, if their name gets misspelled during this process, it is kind of stuck like that until much later down the line. So, there, you'll realize a client will sell you something's misspelled or their first name is being used as their last name. And that is sometimes because at the point of entering the US, someone got it wrong and then it got documented that way. So just so you know, if you don't get confused if you see that. So that's just a nice activity that we like to use to give a sense of how hard it is to think of what would you take with you. And then once you get here, you of course realize that you're missing things, or you couldn't bring something that would have been helpful for you, and how disconnected it might feel to lose all your possessions, essentially. Okay, so we're going to end with a few questions, and I'm actually going to let's see here. I'm actually going to create breakout rooms for this, so you'll be with, I'm not sure exactly how many people end up in each breakout room, but you can look at these questions and let me see. All right. I'm not sure, you know what, I'm not going to do this because we don't have time to do that. We're just going to stay together. So we're going to go through these quick questions, see some of the things that you might have learned today. So what does NSC stand for? I mean, not stand for, like, what does that acronym stand for?
Nationality Service Center.
Good. And one quick thing to remember, because we hear this a lot, is we do say Nationality Service Center, not the Nationality Service Center. A lot of times people will start saying the NSC, but it's just NSC, Nationality Service Center. What's the name of our executive director?
Margaret Sullivan.
Good. What year was NSC founded?
1921.
Good. NSC hours will. Okay, here's a hard one. Can you name what any of these represent? How about just PPR? I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's for the victims of torture.
Good, right.
Remember,
So,
I forgot the.
yeah, it's hard to remember all the names. That's why we always use the letters. But PPR is our Victims of Torture program, and it's called the Philadelphia Partnership for Resilience. And it's a partnership between NSC and HIAS, which is another immigrant service agency in Philadelphia. Oh, okay. And how is the number of refugees entering the country determined?
By a yearly quota set by the president.
Good, great. Okay, and then one final one. Why should we use the term undocumented instead of illegal?
So undocumented would be, because, okay, so illegal is not necessarily completely the truth, especially if they are seeking asylum, because that is not illegal. It's not illegal to seek asylum. They just don't have the proper documents.
Correct. Yeah, right. Yeah, so so that's a really good distinction. You'll also hear people use terms like illegal alien, which is not the most, besides not being accurate in a lot of cases, just as you said, it's also a very dehumanizing, disrespectful way to refer to someone, whereas undocumented refers to their immigration status, not to them as a person, right? So you know, you'll hear people use that term illegal alien all the time. Sometimes people, you know, it's often used in a derogatory way. So it's better to refer to someone as being undocumented or having insecure immigration status. Great, so that is just a brief overview of NSC. I'm going to send you this document as well as as well as the other items that I mentioned. And let me just get rid of that there. Okay. So are there any questions either about what we talked about or anything that's on your mind? It can be, you know, detail kind of things or anything specific about NSC.
I was just wondering about, because I'm currently working on the Pathway to Permanency program, and I know that asylees have to pay legal fees for their I-485, but then refugees do not have to. It's free for them. I-485 is free, the fee. And so is that also because the asylees are working with the legal department and because they haven't received asylee status, they have to go through these filing fees? I was just a little confused.
So you're going to have to ask your supervisor about that because I'm not that familiar with that particular thing.
Okay.
But one thing I will say is that most people, when they're seeking asylum, there are no financial supports from the government in any way. So I can't speak to that particular document. So definitely ask your supervisor about that.
Okay.
But for other things, there's a lot of times when refugees will have something like, you know, health insurance or whatever, whereas asylum seekers don't. So you'll see that kind of, you know, like difference a lot, but definitely follow up with that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I have one more question,
Yeah.
actually. So we did get 1 million cut from our budget. So what are all programs affected the same way, or have more programs been hit worse than other programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's definitely affected in different ways. So for example, that cut in the budget, which fortunately we were able to make up by seeking out other funders, and, you know, it sort of gave us a push to really identify people that believe in our mission and that aren't going to change with the government so quickly. But so that a lot of that money affected our refugee resettlement program because it was designated for that program and it was government money. So when I was an intern, there was a huge refugee resettlement program. There were, I don't know how many people, but it was big. And now there's just a handful of people. So that's an example of a program that really got hit hard by that. Each program has grants that support them, different grants. Sometimes they cover a lot of programs, sometimes it's very specific. So like in my program, I apply for grants that are always around mental health. And since no other program is offering mental health, it's like I'm very directed on what I raise for my program. But I also, my program receives funding from Victims of Crime Act, for example. So if that funding came to an end, it would impact my program because some of our therapists are funded that way. But in a big way, I would say every program is a little bit different. But then we also have just the running of the agency. So, you know, beyond our programs, you know, we have to keep a roof over our head and pay our staff and do all those other things. So then there's programming for operations that can be hit hard. So part of our strategy has been to diversify more in the type of funding we get, but also starting to look into investments and things like that that would hold us over in times of need. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? It can also be like something you're just concerned about, starting something new or something you're not sure about.
I'm just wondering how your operations have, how you've been managing working from home, because obviously some of your services have to be in person,
Yeah.
but you're working from home, so how has that been?
Yeah, so it's been super challenging. for a lot of reasons. I think case management, it's probably the most difficult because not only are we working remotely, but some of the agencies that we might need to access are closed or have limited hours. You know, like if you needed to go to the Social Security office or something like that. Some things have to be done in person. They can't be done remotely. So I'd say it's been really challenging for our case managers, but the focus has been so much on helping people pay their rent and keep food on the table and stay healthy, that all of our focus has gone there, at least since the shutdown. So we had Philadelphia released rental insurance, and you know, we all for a day helped our clients apply for rental insurance because it really got released that day, and that's an immediate need. I think as the weeks go on, it's going to get harder because clients will have things due. So, you know, if you're in a legal, you know, if you're seeking asylum or even if you're a refugee, there's certain dates that you have to do things by. And it's going to be really challenging to see what happens when, you know, you have a deadline. So that's been tough. On the bright side, our clients have shifted to this type of communication very easily. For some people, it's made their lives easier because getting into the office is not always easy for people. So being able to do it by phone is sometimes preferable for some people. In my program, we conduct all of our therapy appointments by phone, and we've actually went from 70% attendance to 100% attendance since we moved to remote therapy. So there's been some good things and there's been some challenging things, but I would say for the most part, everyone has transitioned, like, or, you know, has figured out a way to make things work. The good thing is at NSC, we're always in that position. We are always ready, know that something's going to change, and in an instant, we're going to have to do something differently. So I think it's we've been more prepared than maybe some other places because we always function at that level anyway. I think I feel bad because I know for you guys, because I know as an intern, you know, like, you want to be with people, you want to meet people, you want to interact with clients, and that's a big part of being in an internship. So I feel for you guys that, you know, the timing is happening this way, but I will reiterate that we rely on our interns so much. They're a huge part of what we do. So even though this isn't the ideal scenario, that we're, you know, really happy that you guys are here.
Well, we're happy to be here too.
Yes,
Good.
really happy.
Good. So any other questions before we conclude?
I had one more question.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry,
No,
but
okay.
I was wondering today, especially because in Philadelphia the food distribution sites are closed, and I know that a lot of our clients do use those services during this time and depend on them. And so, how are we going about that today? I'm a little concerned.
So that's an interesting question. I'm supposed to deliver food tomorrow for NSC, and I just sent the same question to the person who runs our, because we have a food bank we have a food pantry at NSC. And I wanted to know, like, what's happening? Am I going to be able to drive through the streets? Am I going to be able to get to NSC? Like, how's that going to work? I haven't got an answer back yet. I will tell you that we have had trouble with the food banks even before this happened. So I imagine it's not a good scenario. We did send out gift cards, like, you know, Amex gift cards or MasterCard gift cards or whatever, to clients initially before we got set up for food delivery so that they could actually go to a store and get their own food. So I imagine if things got dire, we'd probably go back to that model. It's just not sustainable over time because it's a lot of money. But we have negotiated the lack of food for the last couple months. So I haven't heard what's going to happen right in this moment. I imagine it's a little bit of a wait and see to see how long this particular scenario is playing out. But what team are you working on?
I'm in resettlement and pathways to permanency.
Okay, you're definitely going to hear about this when there's something shifts, because a lot of those clients will be receiving these food packages. So I haven't heard of anything specific, but I think that's because people are still trying to figure out what's going on and how long lasting it's going to be.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining in, taking the time. And again, my name is Gwen Soffer. You can email me anytime. My email is gsoffer, S-O-F-F, that's S as in Sam, F-F as in Frank, E-R, at nsc.org. I'm about to send you an email, so you'll see it there too. I just want to make sure, who does everybody here have an NSC email right now?
I have not gotten one yet, but
Okay.
I think yeah.
Okay, so Julia, so Olivia, so everybody but Julia has an NSC email.
Yes.
Okay, Julia, would you mind sending me just your regular email, and
Yeah.
I'll just send it to there for now.
Okay.
And Olivia, could you just each go through and tell me what program you're in again?
I'm in the refugee resettlement program.
Okay, and are you, okay. Okay.
I'm also in the resettlement.
Oh, okay, lots of resettlement.
Also resettlement.
Okay. I see a theme here.
Oh, I'm in matching grant.
Matching grant. Okay. All right. And Julia's sending me hers. Okay. I'll send this information out to you all. Feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have a question. In the guide that I'm going to send you, it also has a list of all kinds of professional development that's coming up that you can join in on. If you're ever in question of something, you can ask your supervisor and they'll be able to tell you. But there's lots of opportunities for different professional development coming up. So keep an eye out for that. Okay. So thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Stay well.
You too.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.